Hello there, you awakening wonder, wherever you are in this world, amidst the omni-crisis that will not yield. Well done for continuing to transcend fear in a darkening space at a time of deep complexity. It's more important that we come together now than ever before. We must transcend this complex time by looking within and finding deep power. Deep power that some would regard as holy is present with you now. Don't be afraid. We're going to keep going together. We're going to talk today about Canada's ongoing information and banking crackdown. Is Canada being used to pilot new degrees of tyranny? I will be speaking to a personal hero of mine later as well, Dr. Bhattacharya. I love this man. He was one of the first credible academics to speak out openly and clearly during the pandemic period and say, what you're doing doesn't make sense. He therefore exposed that what we were being told was science was actually its opposite. When you have someone like Dr. Fauci say, I am science, you know you are dealing with orthodoxy, hegemony. We're going to be all over the gaff for the first part of the show. I mean, we'll be available on all platforms. That was a weird colloquialism to have used there for an international medium such as this and for an international community such as ours. What I mean to say is wherever you get your content, you can watch us now, but you're going to have to click the link in the description eventually and get Rumble and join us on Rumble. And if you haven't got the Rumble app yet, get it now, because if you subscribe to us on Rumble and turn on the notification bell, you'll be told every time we make content. You'll be told about our live streams. Fantastic live streams. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about. And oh, by the way, if you can support us by clicking the red button and becoming Awake and Wonder, it's more important now than ever. We do meditations together. We do Bible readings together. We're like people that we're preppers, man. We're prepping now. We're not prepping. Well, we are. But we're preparing for something better than this. You know the system doesn't work. We tell you how every day. Over there, as an Awake and Wonder, we're going to explain to you the new solutions. We will discover together how we're going to get through this. The 5 ideas that are going to save the world. 5 communities that are off-grid and out of the system that work better. These are the things we're going to learn together. You feel you don't fit in this world? I know what it's like to feel that feeling. I've felt it my whole life. You come with us. We'll work this out together. Now, Tucker Carlson has spoken out on the complex, evolving situation in the Middle East. Particularly, he's criticised Nikki Haley and Lindsey Graham. Both said supporting Ukraine is in US national interest, and both of them have used extremely vehement rhetoric with regard to this complex matter. I have too much respect for those that are personally harmed in this unprecedented, escalatory, and difficult time to offer you strong condemnation, support, or anything. I simply don't feel qualified. But Tucker is pointing out some interesting things that I think we can all agree on. Wherever you stand on this complex issue, and I suppose the only way forward is to appreciate that there are numerous positions, you have to recognize, as we discussed yesterday, that it's wrong for people in Congress to profit from this. We all agree with that, right? People in Congress shouldn't be investing right now in weapons manufacturers and energy companies to exploit their insider knowledge, should they? Let me know in the chat and the comments. Tucker points out that people in positions of political power should surely not be using incendiary rhetoric. What do you think about that? And perhaps more importantly still, do you trust them? Do you trust them on Ukraine, Russia? Do you trust them to handle this situation in the Middle East? Do you trust those institutions at all? The government, the legacy media? Do you trust them? Let's have a look at what Tucker Carlson's saying and let me know what you feel about what Tucker's saying on this subject.
So there's a lot at stake in how we encourage Israel to respond to the horrifying Hamas attacks. Wisdom and long-term thinking are essential, but you will not be surprised to learn that is not what we are getting. Watch this person, for example, who happens to be the media's pick for President of the United States.
This is not just an attack on Israel. This is an attack on America because they hate us just as much. And what we have to understand is this is the reason that we have to unite around making sure our enemies do not hurt our friends. America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends, just like we needed them on 9/11. That's why Ukraine needs us when Russia's doing this. That's why Israel needs us when Hamas and Iran are doing this. And I'll say this to Prime Minister Netanyahu, finish them. Finish them. Hamas did this. You know Iran's behind it. Finish them. They should have hell to pay for what they've just done.
This was an attack on America, she says, when in fact it was not. And for that reason, we must, quote, finish Iran, a nation of nearly 90 million people. What are we watching here? This is not sober leadership. She's a child, and this is the tantrum of a child, ignorant, cocksure, bloodthirsty. Yet no one in Washington scolded her for it. In fact, they aped her hysteria. Here's fellow neocon Lindsey Graham just spelling it out and calling for the bombing of Iran.
Notice that Tucker uses phrases like neocon to ensure we understand that transcendent of the presumed division between Democrat and Republican, there's a political movement that encompasses both of those sides, meaning you have very little when it comes to meaningful democratic purchase.
So I've been on the phone all day to the Mideast, and I've told our allies and people with connections to Iran, what I would do, I would tell Iran that if Hezbollah attacks Israel, we're going to come after you, the Iranians, and have a coordinated effort between the United States and Israel.
Do you wonder that complex, tragic, awful as this situation is and continues to be, that there are people that are exploiting it? Do you consider that the people in Congress that are purchasing stocks in weapons manufacturers are exploiting this situation? Do you think that those that are pushing an agenda to increase expenditure on the Ukraine-Russia conflict are exploiting this situation? Do you think that politicians, such as we have just been shown, are exploiting this situation to increase military tensions, to increase military expenditure? Do you think if we investigated the funding of Lindsey there and Nikki there, we might find that there are donations from weapons manufacturers and other vested interests? I cannot enough convey to you my determination not to further impede on the broken hearts of people directly affected by this tragedy. What I urge is that those of us that are not directly affected, and in a way we are all directly affected, but not in the same way that people that are religiously, ideologically, or personally connected to this issue, we have to consider how is this being exploited, cynically exploited by institutions that usually, when our emotions are a little more in alignment, even though that's generally hard these days in this state of omni-crisis and generally escalating tensions, it's hard to remain sanguine and clear and focused. And yet those of us who can surely must. And those that are directly affected and understandably hurt, furious, broken, grief-stricken and terrified, those people's feelings must, of course, be respected. But let me know what you think about Tucker's observation that the hysteria of Nikki Haley and the warmongering of Lindsey Graham might not be about the service of any of the people directly involved in the conflict. For have we not seen many times legitimate and real crises exploited to the advantage of powerful interests, even in times of heightened emotion? Surely we must remain present enough to observe what we have already learned about these exploiting interests. It's so vital that those of us that can stay present do stay present, and pray for those that are currently unable to due to their understandable grief, anguish and despair.
To put Iran out of the oil business by destroying their refineries.
I mean, don't actually talk about the oil business. Like, this is like people are being murdered. This is a devastating, awful, awful situation. Let's get oil business, though. Let's take a minute's silence for the oil business.
There are 4 major refineries in Iran. They're fixed targets.
Oh, my God. That's not about the victims of the terrorist attack. That's not about people living in Gaza, is it? It doesn't matter. We should all be appalled by that. Are you appalled by this?
If Hezbollah attacks Israel, I would make Iran pay a heavy price.
What exactly would happen to the United States if we declared war on Iran and started blowing up their infrastructure? Lindsey Graham has no clue what would happen. He hasn't thought it through. He's almost 70 years old and he has no children. He doesn't care.
Tucker Carlson is incisive, isn't he? What he does very elegantly, Tucker Carlson, is he's stating and expressing opinion. I think he's being very respectful, at least the bits that we're watching now and commenting on. And then he gives Lindsey Graham such a massive dig for not having kids. What is that about? What is that about?
But neither, amazingly, do most of his colleagues in Washington. They're as reckless as he is. Texas Congressman Dan Crenshaw took to social media to call for what he described as a war to end all wars, as if there is such a thing.
Plainly, ordinary consciousness is being taken to its very limits. That's why it's worrying that progressive Gavin Newsom, governor of California, who has always presented himself as the future, plainly a person who sees himself as a potential president, let me know in the chat if you think he's being primed for such a role, has vetoed the possibility of psychedelics being used therapeutically. There's a lot of complexity around this issue too. A lot of us think, oh man, you don't want those being exploited or falling into the hands of big pharma or whatever, because many of you know and sense that there are deeper realities than the material realities. If you believe in God, like I believe in God, you know there are great powers that are beyond any situation, any condition, any person, any political movement. And surely we must call upon those powers now. And one of the indicators that there are other layers, realms, and frequencies to reality are psychedelics. So luckily, Gavin Newsom, lockdown party goer, is pretty keen to ban them.
Here, Governor Newsom has vetoed a bill to decriminalize the possession and personal use of magic mushrooms, as well as other psychedelic drugs. The governor says the psychedelics may help people dealing with depression and mental illness, but the state must create clear guidelines for their use before they are legalized.
The governor also vetoing a bill designed to legalize cannabis cafes in California.
Yeah, that's right. We know back in 2016, we saw Governor Newsom here championing legalizing cannabis.
Yeah, that's right. He's not that progressive after all. He uses the rhetoric of progressivism, but actually he seems to be quite authoritarian. I mean, remember when he sacked all those doctors for misinformation? Simply put, your family doctor had to tell you agreed government positions on COVID. Otherwise, they risked being sacked. So that doesn't sound progressive, does it? And he's also recently announced upcoming digital ID. Like, really, they're not progressive. They just sort of have a haircut or whatever and talk about caring about minority groups or disadvantaged people, but actually don't create policies that will in any way benefit people that are disadvantaged in any way. All they ever care about, it seems, is increasing authoritarianism. And they certainly don't want people voyaging into the depths of their psyche and discovering a deep unity between all the world's people, and that love is a powerful resource that can be accessed in every individual and could ultimately be used to create new systems and new democracies. I have taken some magic mushrooms. I'm going to hand myself into Gavin Newsom right now.
Now, when it comes to psychedelics, he says that more still needs to be done, such as implementing more guidelines. Now, this bill would have legalized or taken away those criminal penalties for anyone 21 and up in the state from possessing or using psychedelics such as magic mushrooms. Dr. Alia Ahmad is a psychedelic researcher and physician at Shaman's Healing Center in Sacramento. She says they are disappointed in the governor's decision after researching some of the positive impacts psychedelics can have on treating mental health disorders.
What you've done there is you've made the mistake of thinking that Gavin Newsom and the government more broadly are interested in anything other than accruing more authority that can ultimately be used in the service of deep state and globalist corporate interests. As long as you bear that in mind, you'll never be disappointed again. Their legislation will always increase their ability to control individuals and let off the hook powerful corporations. That's why in the state of omni-crisis, ongoing war, lots of people profit from that. And people in Congress invest in more war. That's why in a health crisis, pharmaceutical companies benefit. That's why in an energy crisis where your energy bills go up, energy companies that are subsidized make record profits. So what they need is more and more ability to shut down dissent. Notice that's happening through censorship bills. More ability to control certainly the sort of consciousness and layers of reality that you explore that might possibly cause you to change your value system. All that's got to be shut right down. They want authority and absolute control, and the way that they will legitimize that authority is through safety, through keeping you safe. Do you know who I'd like to keep safe? Like me and literally anyone other than the government, legacy media, financial system, unelected globalist bodies that pass down regulation to individual sovereign nations. I'd like them out the picture. And guess what? We can't do that unless all of us come together and are willing to put aside some of our many and sometimes glaringly obvious causes for division and opposition. My God, we better find a way to transcend. We better find a way to transcend, because the enemy are organising fast, and the enemy is not each other. Also, X is being censored to within an inch of its life. Elon Musk's brave stand against censorship is now under attack from, of all things, the EU. Do you even know what the EU is? The EU's like a government for Europe. I mean, it doesn't even really properly make sense. No one really wants it anymore. It's ridiculous. It's untrustworthy. It's expensive. And they've judged X to be a hotbed for illegal content and disinformation. Thierry Breton, who's like just some sort of EU commissioner, talks like James Gandolfini or something. He's written Elon Musk a letter saying, following the terrorist attacks carried out by Hamas against Israel, we have indications that your platform is being used to disseminate illegal content and disinformation in the EU. I remind you that following the opening of a potential investigation and a finding of non-compliance, penalties can be imposed. Do you see how this awful, terrible situation is being exploited by the weapons industry? It's being exploited by people that want to censor media spaces. It's being exploited because people's emotions are understandably running over, and people see that as a window. Look at what they do. Just try to remember. This is why we as individuals, we've got to do our best to find some different level of connection with one another. Please press the red button. Join us if you can. If you can't, it's so important that you download that app if you can. Stay with us if you can. Let's have a look at how Vera Jourova talks about the necessity for, I don't know, censorship, probably.
X, former Twitter, who is not under the code anymore, is the platform with the largest ratio of mis- or disinformation posts.
Who's deciding what's misinformation and disinformation? You? Who's going to make those kind of choices? The same people that have decided that saying, get a vaccine, if you get a vaccine, it stops right now, or that ivermectin is horse paint. Who's making the decision? Who do you trust? Do you trust the government? Do you trust the legacy media? Do you trust the EU? Do you trust the UN or the WEF? Why would you trust them? Some of them you fund one way or another, if not directly through your taxes, through bizarre commercial arrangements. But do you trust them? I don't.
The pilot also showed that disinformation actors were found to have significantly more followers than their non-disinformation counterparts.
People seem to like people that don't like us and what we tell them. We not like this. Why don't we find any way of shutting down anybody who doesn't agree with us? We could just say whatever we want and then say their argument against what we're saying is a kind of disinformation. This is brilliant. In fact, if we can eliminate Elon Musk and his considerable wealth and evident principles, then we can control the whole world. No, sorry. I mean, we can help people more because you can see how we're helping. Look around at all of the help that's happening. Do you think that the imposition of online censorship is about authoritarianism, managing information, managing dissent, presenting commercial opportunities to valued corporate partners, controlling the potential for oppositionist organisations in any country around the world, let alone global alliances that oppose globalism itself? Or do you think it's about they're worried that when you go online, that you might be somehow vulnerable or hurt? What is it they've ever said or done in all history that leads you to think they care about your feelings?
Tend to have joined the platform more recently than non-disinformation users. Mr. Musk knows that he is not off the hook.
You are not off the hook. You are still very much on the hook. We can still get to your money. We can censor you.
Because now we have the Digital Services Act fully in force.
Oh my God, so you can't just opt. Remember when it was convenient for them to say, oh, they're private platforms? Do you remember that? They're private platforms. They can say what they want. They can ban Donald Trump if they want to. It's a private platform. Oh, right, they're not banning Donald Trump anymore. Regulate them!
We will be enforcing that. We have our, I think, very well-equipped unit which will monitor and supervise what the platforms are doing. And as Twitter has been designated as the very large online platform, of course, there are obligations given by the hard law. So my message for Twitter is you have to comply with the hard law.
The only decision we have to make as individuals, people that believe in free speech, is do you trust these institutions or not? Do you trust them to make moral judgment? Do you trust them to discern what's misinformation and disinformation and what isn't? If the answer, like my personal answer, is no, I don't trust them. I don't trust them at all. Then you have to, in one way or another, oppose this tyrannical tide towards centralized power and the closing down of free speech.
We will be watching what you are doing.
What's terrifying, additionally terrifying, about what Vera Jourova is saying is that laws are being passed all around the world to prohibit free speech. And as we have told you before, if you shut down free speech, then everything else is up in the air. Let's explain to you how that happens. Canada has already brought in online regulatory laws that mean that podcasts can be controlled and that online platforms can be fined if they report on information that the government deems to be misinformation. Oh, that was misinformation. However, let me show you already in real time what that's led to. In Canada, there's been an unprecedented spate of debanking people. That means shutting down the bank accounts of people who essentially you don't like, presumably because they're Nazis, although in Canada, being a Nazi can literally get you a round of applause in Parliament. You know that. That's not my fault. That's their fault. They did it. So people are getting their bank accounts shut down if they don't agree with the state. Why don't we know about that? That's weird. That should have been in the news. Yeah, I'll tell you why it's not in the news. Because the legacy media won't report it because they're in alignment with it. And independent media can't report it because they're being regulated and controlled. That's what happens if you allow this type of legislation to be passed. If we don't all stand up together now, we're going to lose the possibility to stand together forever. Let's have a look at Canada, dystopia pilot, practicing laws and regulations that even 5 years ago would have been unimaginable. Here's the news? No. Here's the effing news.
Thank you for choosing Fox News.
No, here's the fucking news.
Canada's debanking people. What does debanking mean? It means shutting down people's bank accounts. Why haven't I heard of that? Because Canada's also got online streaming laws that mean you can't be told the news. Oh, well, it's just Canada piloting dystopia. It's happening in other countries as well, like the UK. Oh, so is hell around the corner? Well, no, it's actually here. We've got to do something. So, Canada, it's not like Canada was a utopia, an Eden, a vision of a better world, even if they do have politicians called things like Justin Trudeau or Chrystia Freeland, the sarcastically named Canadian politicians. What's your name? Truth, freedom, what's your policy? We're in charge. It's a strange and crazy place. I never looked at Canada as a sort of an outlier when it comes to like a perfect civilization. Although I will say, as an English person, you always think America's going a bit too far with the colonizing the world and the resource wars and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about, back in Iraq days. And I used to think that Canada and Australia, well, they're not as bad as we are, trenched in tradition and the colonialism and all the blood on the hands of that stuff. But also they're not doing the new commercial version of colonialism that America's doing. Maybe Australia and Canada are some sort of slightly more neutered version of an Anglophonic future. But now both those countries are essentially pilot schemes for dystopia, whether it's internment camps in Australia during lockdown or Canada, its new online censorship bill, basically a censorship bill. We've got one of those here, of course, as well. But now they're literally debanking people. I don't keep saying debanking because it sounds too much like debunking people. I debunk you, sir. How dare you? This maple syrup's perfect. It's not that. It's like they're shutting down people's bank accounts, usually because they don't agree with their views. Like with the famous trucker convoys, they started messing with people's money. When they start messing with your money, messing with your free speech, that's not good, is it? Let's get into it.
A bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
Okay, well that's terrifying. Don't just say that as if it's all right while Justin Trudeau stands there covering his mouth and genitals simultaneously, as if that prevents us from seeing what's truly happening here. Canada is meant to be a country that is a celebration of liberalism. What does liberalism mean these days? Let us know in the chat. Now, if you follow Jordan Peterson, you'll know that they're doing all sorts of extraordinary stuff with his license as a clinician that doesn't seem right. And what we can't fall into, and I beg you not to, I know a lot of you will love Jordan Peterson, certainly I love Jordan Peterson, but a lot of you will go oh, Jordan Peterson though, isn't he sexist or whatever? Or Nigel Farage, who we'll be talking about later. I've had actual arguments on TV with Nigel Farage and spats because I don't agree with him on a bunch of stuff. But I tell you what, I don't think that you should shut down Nigel Farage's bank account because you don't agree with him. I don't think that. I think Nigel Farage should be allowed to express himself freely in a democracy. And if in a democracy a referendum don't go your way, hey baby, democracy that you said you love. So when you start shutting down people's bank accounts, shutting down people's people's free speech, and when the rest of us go, I don't mind really because I don't agree with that person, what we are is sort of compliant with emergent forms of fascism.
The Canadian government is cracking down on financial supporters of the illegal blockade. So if you are one of the Canadians who donated, should you expect your bank accounts to be frozen today?
Well, no, because that's terrifying. Also, they just glibly refer to it as an illegal convoy. What do you mean illegal convoy? Just for a minute, step back. If you don't agree with something that's happening in your country that you live in, should you be able to protest without knowing what the subject is? What's it about? Is it something that I agree with? No. What, you've got that? Have some principles. All right then, yes, you should be able to protest. Right, so why is this protest illegal? Because we don't agree with it.
An emailed comment from the Canadian Bankers Association says the required measures will be diligently implemented by financial service providers, but they don't expect them to impact the vast majority of customers. They also did not define what diligently implemented means.
It just means they're going to try their hardest to shut down the bank accounts of people they don't agree with. And it won't impact the vast majority of customers. I should hope not. I mean, if the vast majority of your customers are going to have their bank accounts frozen, I don't see things going very well at the bank. Well, it's quite good because we're keeping all their money.
Canada's Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, also announced that order covers both personal and corporate accounts. But the Canadian Bankers Association said that we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out.
Probably be all right. Now, you might have noticed that this is a news report from a little while ago. The news that we're going to tell you is up to the second. But there is no mainstream media news or indeed online news on this because Canada have introduced an online safety bill that allows them to censor this type of information. And we're introducing these kind of bills all around the world. And you might have noticed that independent media voices are being vehemently attacked and shut down everywhere. Have you noticed that? Because I have. So look at what's going on. Hello?
After 3 ministers, 5 years, and dozens of amendments, the Liberal government's controversial Online Streaming Act has finally become law. And there are some big changes coming for streamers.
There certainly are. Everything you do is subject to new scrutiny and censorship and fines. You would have seen that X were threatened with a fine just the other day. We'll be talking about that elsewhere.
The law will require platforms to promote Canadian content.
Good.
Require streaming services like Netflix to pay to support Canadian media content like music and TV shows.
Oh.
And it will give the CRTC broad powers over digital media companies, including the ability to impose financial penalties for violations of the Act.
That doesn't sound as good, especially if you can't pay those penalties because your bank account's being shut down. Do you know what I mean? When you get the government sort of calling up social media companies and saying, are you going to demonetize that person? This is not liberalism. Liberalism is not authoritarian. Have you noticing how words are changing their meaning? That is also not good. Free speech is an important value. Yes, but people are so hateful. What about the misanthropy at the core of that? If you allow people to speak freely, they will say hateful things. Yeah, well, sometimes people aren't perfect, but I'd rather endure a little of that than the alternative, which is granting authority to institutions that we know are corrupt already and don't trust. So you've not heard about the debanking, firstly because it's a stupid word, and secondly because it's a ludicrous policy. If you're British, you'll have heard about the Nigel Farage story. If you're Canadian, you might not have heard of the debanking that's going on in your country because people aren't reporting on it because there's a censorship law in place that prevents the truth from being accurately conveyed. I'm not making this up. It's actually happening. You can look it up for yourself, but actually we'll do it for you and save you a bit of time. A sweeping debanking wave has swept across Canada, affecting over 800 citizens in its tide since 2018, a number which includes hundreds who rallied behind the banner of the Freedom Convoy, obviously. Data unearthed through an access to information request by Black Locks, not to be confused with Black Rocks, please don't confuse them with Black Rock, reporter unveiled a disturbing pattern where 837 individuals found the doors of their banks slammed shut on them over a span of 5 years. The Financial Consumer Agency of Canada was brought into the loop through grievances lodged with regulatory bodies shedding light on financial strangulation that bypassed cases of validated terrorism and money laundering. Right, so terrorism and money laundering, that's a legitimate reason, I guess, to debank someone. Now, as has often been pointed out, in many of the areas where censorship regulation is introduced or new forms of regulation are introduced, we already have laws for that. Violence is already illegal, terrorism's already illegal, money laundering's already illegal. The new laws that you're legitimizing through the use of that language are actually redundant because that stuff's already legislated against. And hold on, there's a whole raft of new powers that are going to affect everybody. In a deeper dive into the numbers, it's revealed that the financial shackles tightened around 267 bank accounts and 170 Bitcoin wallets belonging to Freedom Convoy supporters, ensnaring an estimated $7.8 million. That's probably means they won't be able to protest, so you won't be able to argue with the government. So the government is a liberal government that believes in freedom and helping people. No, that doesn't sound right, does it? Tyrannical. Yes, that's what it is. This exercise in financial censorship spun a web of scrutiny during a hearing on March the 7th, 2022, when Angelina Mason, representing the Bankers Association, testified. Mason outlines that while the Royal Canadian Mounted Police supplied a list of names, banks were also mandated by separate orders to exercise their judgment in identifying account holders for debanking. So they sort of are, right, well, the police can have a little look, but they're busy. You know, they're mounted after all. They've got to tend to the horse, I suppose, and that hat can't be easy to look after. So would you, the bank yourself, just have a look around in people's accounts, see if there's any familiar names, see if there's anything that you don't agree with going on? We can't empower banks to do that. That's not what a bank is. How can banks make moral decisions about their customers when they make their money through investing in all sorts of nefarious activity? Weapons manufacturers, energy. Have you ever looked into how banks are making their money, what their moral position is? Do you remember what happened in 2008? Do you remember how that banking crisis played out? And you know who supported them in that? The government. So the government and banks being arbiters of morality, like the same way as the media. We're the media, and here's our moral. You're letting the actual scum of the earth determine right from wrong. What do you think that's going to lead to? We have to work fast. We have to work smart. We have to recognise, I recognise now, this is not a game anymore. This is actually happening. A few years ago, maybe you'd see someone like Alex Jones or something, you think, oh, come on, he's a sort of an hysterical preacher. And perhaps archetypally, there is some of that in a character like Alex Jones, who, let me say plainly, I don't agree with everything he says, the same way as I don't agree with everything Nigel Farage says. But I do agree with people's right to speak. I do agree with people's right to disagree with me. I do agree with principles of justice and legislation and order and democracy, ideas around which the argument is supposed to have been won. And the people and groups and parties that claim to most espouse and represent those values, guess what they're doing? They're at odds with those values. They're limiting those values. They're walking back those values and replacing them with authoritarianism. Just going, but look at our hair and listen to us saying that we care about this group or that group. They don't care about anything. They care about power. And even if they do care about those things, they're not legislating in alignment with the principles they're discussing. They're legislating in an authoritarian manner. The outrage at the Nigel Farage Coots NatWest debanking scandal in the United Kingdom does not align with the complete disinterest in Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's debanking of an entire political caste. In England, we do one person. In Canada, we're going to do an entire political caste. Nice one, Canada. Banking, has been argued in the halls of Parliament and in the pages of major publications, is a human right in the modern world. Debanking, it follows, should be seen as an abuse of those fundamental rights. Unfortunately, it is clear UK parliamentarians only cared about the Farage debanking scandal because they could see themselves suffering the same fate when they're voted out of office, which is likely to be soon. This goes a long way to explaining why those same MPs who now make grand speeches about the human rights of banking said nothing and did nothing during the COVID years when their fellow Commonwealth nation Canada debanked citizens as punishment for protesting against the government. The government may not be on your team, the legacy media may not be on your team, but I tell you who's on our team, and therefore yours. Sticker Mule. We've teamed up with Sticker Mule once more to create this limited edition sticker pack. You are going to love this. There are... Wait a second, it's quite difficult to get in, but, you know, got to keep these stickers safe. There are 6 stunning designs that are only available in this pack. Oh, isn't it exciting? They're all made with Sticker Mule's magic touch. Sticker Mule has 10,000 of these packs. That's right, 10,000 ready to deliver to your address absolutely free. You can have it now. Like me, I've got this one. You can have one. Just go to stickermule.com/Russell and fill out the form. It's really worth it. You look, this one, part of my clothes now. Put it on your laptop. Put it on your phone. Put it wherever you want to. It's your life is completely free. 10,000 packs. Look at me contemplating life, just trying my best. Fantastic. Good old Sticker Mule. Sticker Mule, we loves ya. Okay, let's get back to this story about the Canadian government. Because I tell you what, you can't trust... Do you know who should run Canada? Sticker Mule. Come on, let's get into this. Giving police excessive powers to attack the finances of those attending peaceful protests shocked many, and yet the silence from leaderships around the world fell heavy on the air. Only the pages of the truly independent press were screeching. Only independent media can report on stories like this for now. That's being impeded by censorship laws around the world. The silence from the political class is understandable. It happened during a time when every Western government was engaged in the abuse of human rights and civil rights through various emergency powers and health orders. It was being normalised. We're now seeing, as many people said we would, post-COVID authoritarianism being normalised. The use of technology to extract people from mainstream culture, normalised. If people don't get vaccines, they just shouldn't be allowed out. That's what it should be. If someone without a vaccine goes to a hospital, they should be refused treatment, right? Start to normalise that stuff. Now look what's happening. Well, if someone, protests about something, you should shut their bank account down. What? When did all this? Haven't we had that argument already, like in medieval times? And didn't we agree that what we were going to do is people are allowed to have different views from one another? Like, where are all those values gone? Where have they gone? What's happening? None of our leaders broke ranks, observing the don't throw stones in a glass house ideology. The press are the ones who should have been pelting rocks at these glass houses, but they kept quiet too, because they too had threatened their staff with mandates or taken vast sums of money from Big Pharma. If citizens tried to speak on social media, they were erased from platforms that were making a killing in pharmaceutical ad revenue. What a miss. The Russia-Ukraine conflict provided a well-timed distraction for Trudeau to wind back his emergency declaration and then not talk about it for months. While Trudeau scolded Russia for her authoritarian behaviour, his dictatorial leanings had already eroded Canada's democracy. To this, Trudeau blamed social media for spreading misinformation and disinformation, which turned the people against the values and principles of democracies. Would those principles include the right to a peaceful protest, Trudeau? Or banking? So how can something as radical as shutting down people's bank accounts and empowering banks to shut down people's bank accounts, banks, happen without being reported on? Because there's already censorship laws in place in Canada, and it's happening in the UK, and it's happening in your country. Do you know how I know that? Because it's happening everywhere. For months, representatives of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government insisted that their plans to regulate big tech social media platforms wouldn't impact independent news outlets or podcasters. Oh, what? And those promises were lies? But it turns out that the government is in fact going to regulate content providers, not just big tech social media platforms. So they've got two ways. They can directly control the content of the creators, but also they can threaten the social media platforms themselves with fines. So they're basically introducing laws to allow them to control the information on big tech platforms. That's happened already, actually. While the government is preparing to regulate independent content providers, whether news or podcasts, it's preparing to subsidise more news media content. I wonder what type of news media content will get subsidised. I wonder if it will be like favourable news. I wonder if it will be news channels that don't go, hey, they're debanking your fellow Canadians because they disagree with the government. And that's not good, is it? Because we already know that democracy is ineffectual for two reasons. Both of the two parties that you can vote for are too similar to make a meaningful impact on the lives of ordinary people. Also, they are funded by the same interests, and there are sets of global bodies that dictate, as you have seen in the last few years, their policies, whether that's on health, medical, or censorship matters. And now, independent media organisations that point that stuff out are being shut down. What don't you have? You don't have democracy. You have a kind of spectacle. The federal government already gives $1.4 billion in direct support to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation compared to the $650 million it receives from commercial revenue. So it's not fair competition. That's state media. That's where you get propaganda from, is state media. Elon Musk recently said that many mainstream media providers were essentially state propagandist utilities. Now, in the case of this Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, what you have is state funding and commercial funding. So whose interests do you think they're representative of? The state, who provide funding, commercial partners who provide funding, or you, Canadian people, who can have your bank accounts shut down if you don't do exactly what you're told. The Liberals are using two bills and a series of regulations to crack down on free speech online. C11, the Online News Act, and C18, the Online Streaming Act. While these bills worked their way through the legislative process, the Liberals repeatedly lied and said they were about targeting big tech and protecting and promoting Canadian culture. In fact, they were part of a deliberate effort to censor ordinary Canadians. They're not going to come out and say, we're going to to censor ordinary Canadians. They say, oh, we've got big tech's got too much power, we have to shut them down. Meanwhile, what they have with big tech are partnerships. Partnerships, in the case of like the United States, you know that they have military contracts, all manner of tech and data contracts with companies like Microsoft and Facebook. And now what they are doing is legislating new partnerships to control information and censor dissent. It's happening in Canada, particularly plainly observably now. This means it'll be harder to express yourself online, and digital-first outlets will be disproportionately negatively impacted. Traditional outlets will be economically reliant on the feds, and their lobby groups are already mobilising to push the federal government for more support. So much for independent journalism. Even I was a relative latecomer to YouTube, been on there for like 10 years or whatever it is, and I noticed, and you will have noticed, that at the beginning, prominent independent YouTube voices were given quite largesse. It was like an ecosystem guided by the algorithm in which there was a kind of, I don't know, Darwinism, a kind of ecology that found its own way. But then there were some decisions made to promote what you might call legacy media within it. And now that's just blatantly happened, hasn't it? Now those sites are in lockstep with the government and legacy media. There's a war happening. There's a war happening for your attention, for your beliefs, for your faith, for your ideology. What they want from you is obedience, compliance, induced by fear. That's a very broad statement. I believe it to be true. What we want is to keep alive the possibility of change, of empowering individuals and communities outside of these establishment institutions. That's only going to happen, the good news is it can happen, but it's only going to happen with individual responsibility. The famous comment, the thing that I always hear in the chat, but what can I do individually? Resist, awaken. Now, the government says it's doing this to protect and promote Canadian culture, ensure legacy news outlets operate for a healthy democracy, and ensure marginalised voices are heard. In reality, Trudeau and the Liberal Party are doing this so they can spread disinformation and quash dissent. It's the opposite of what they're saying. Trudeau's crackdown comes at a time when the European Union, United Nations and World Economic Forum are all demanding harsh crackdowns on free speech. Wow, how weird. Some politicians are justifying the crackdown as part of fighting the war in Ukraine. You know how we're going to fight the war in Ukraine? I don't know, by like sort of giving them stockpiled weapons that you've already paid for and renewing your contracts with Lockheed Martin, Raytheon and other highly profitable, big spending, lobbying organisations. Oh yeah, we like that, yes. But also though, you've got to shut up. The UN next month is co-sponsoring a pro-censorship event with the World Economic Forum, a private organisation. They're trying to like turn it into Christmas, aren't they? Like Christmas of anti-free speech. Ho, 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 ho. Just two hoes. Ho, ho. In fact, one ho. Ho. That's right. That's what you all are. They are creating a global coalition for digital safety. We've got to be safe. So first of all, they have to terrify you to the point where, yeah, what's your number one problem? Is it that you can't afford food? Is it that you can't afford energy? Is it that you can't speak freely anywhere? I mean, even among one another, because you're scared the whole time that there's no sort of consensus and love between human beings. Oh no, it's that I just don't feel safe online. When I'm online, I'm like, look, I just put it down, I'm fine, look. This is overreach, it's manipulation, it's lies, it's not what they're telling you it is. It's an attempt to shut down your ability to form realities, actually. Realities, shared realities where we go, wait, what if they're all lying to us? Wait, what if the state has ultimately been co-opted by globalist corporate interests? Yes, undergirded by the deep state, keep going, and the media just amplifies and normalizes the messaging of those people, and within democracy, there's no meaningful dissent or opposition to those ideas that both parties in any country, your one, my one, two parties more or less the same, one goes up, one goes down, both crap. What then if we aren't even able to use this new technology to go, hey, have you noticed this? Once that's shut down, it's over. Could it be that? Or is it that, what I just described, or is it they're really worried that you might get your feelings hurt while you're on the internet? Do you really, after everything they've done, think it could be that? Polling shows these efforts run contrary to Canadian beliefs. Yeah, that's not what actual people want. We can solve our differences through conversation, through communication, through honesty, through transparency, through redemption, atonement, salvation, openness, through values and principles that they are not interested in because it would end their establishment interests. One poll shows nearly half of all Canadians think feds should rescind Bill C-18, the Online Streaming Act. There's not going to be a vote on that then. Now more than 6 in 10 Canadians are concerned about the bill's impacts. Canadians are also showing how media savvy they are. They don't think big news organisations need government bailouts. Of course they bloody well don't. They're not bailouts, they're hush money. They're bribes, and they believe C18 will harm smaller outlets. Voters may soon too change how they view government promises as they learn that the Liberal Party lied when it said their plans to regulate big tech social media platforms wouldn't impact independent news outlets or podcasters. Eventually, Canada must move to a regime where neither the big tech social media platforms nor users are in the government's censorship system. So, people are being debanked, not indiscriminately, but deliberately. Opponents and dissidents are losing the ability to have access to banking. Sometimes these decisions are being made by the banks themselves. Let's think for a moment about the morality of the banking system. Let's think for a moment about the morality of the government. Oh dear. Let's think for a moment about the morality of the legacy media, who are being advantaged by the online censorship bills that prevent the banking regulations that are just being introduced, that you can be debanked. It could happen to you. Do you think it can't happen to you? Well, here's the way that it won't happen to you. Become an obedient little prisoner of the state. Never think anything they don't want you to think, and certainly don't do anything they don't want you to do. Sit still, be quiet, never protest, never think about a better version of reality. Never think about what words like democracy, justice, media, truth, opportunity, freedom, but get those words out of your vocabulary or invert their meanings into the new prescribed meanings of your new centralized, authoritarian, globalist overlords as being piloted in Canada. That's what's happening right now, and it's coming to you because it's already happening in the UK. It will be happening everywhere. The only thing that can stop it is you. That's why it's so important that you press the red button and join our movement. Support us if you can, but if you can't, that doesn't matter. It's so much more important that we have your loyalty, your attention, your faith, your hope, your optimism than anything else that you could give us. Let me know what you think in the chat, and I'll see you in a second.
No, here's the fucking news.
Joining me now is Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, Professor of Medicine at Stanford University, co-founder of Illusion of Consensus on Substack. He's recently won in the federal court against the Biden administration for coercing social media companies to censor content. Plainly, as well as a scientist and a doctor, this man is a conspiracy theorist. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, it's a great joy to meet